Dena. He's a prospective student. Come to the Hey, Queen.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
We miss you.
Okay. So I want to talk about the character of Aaron HaKohen. First, I'll even ask, like, why is he relevant in this week's parsha? Yeah?
He makes the Egel.
Exactly, because he makes the Egel. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to get there. But before we get to the Egel, we'll start with actually the very first, like, episode. You know, we'll sort of go in order of, like, where he shows up. But before I even do that, I'm just even curious, like, quick show of hands. Like, how many of you, I don't know, like, knee-jerk gut reaction, like, Aaron HaKohen, like, love him. I wouldn't say anybody hates him. You can't hate Aaron HaKohen. But, like, you know, love him versus, like, I don't know, sort of not my type. But so I'm curious, like, how many of you, like, oh, if you're Aaron, you're just like, oh, gotta love Aaron. I have to say, I'm on that side. But I totally understand why not everybody is. Is there anybody who's like, again, he's not a character that you would hate, but is there anybody who's like, Aaron, he's such a like wimp or anything like that, or like? Right, I understand. I know there are people who think that. By the way, in the movie, or like in the movie Prince, I do not think so, but I hear my son might. Wait, we'll talk about it. But like, for example, in the movie Prince of Egypt, right? Like, they do not portray him well, right? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. The 2 minutes, like whatever, right? Like he's like, he's annoying and like like weak character. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, okay, well, honestly, I'll just say at the outset, he's one of my absolute favorite characters. But we'll see. Let's okay, but let's talk about him and understand. He really is, I think, though, a very rich and complex character. Okay, so that being said, let's start from the beginning, right? Where's the first time? I know I shouldn't have handed out the sheet yet, so don't cheat. Right? Where do we meet him for the first time?
Ever?
Yeah. Exactly, right? Fascinatingly, right? If you take a look, we'll even just see the psukim very quickly, where what happens, of course, is right at the burning bush, and God comes to Moshe and says, "You're my guy. I want you to, you know, carry out this mission." And of course, as we all know, what's Moshe's reaction? No. Anybody other than me. In fact, right, he famously says, that's actually the very first pasuk I brought here, Vayomer bi Ado Shem, hard to know, whatever, right? Shlach, everything is hard to know, is that like just my master, or is he saying Ado Shem, whatever, but either way. Shlach na b'yad tishlach, which is actually not clear what that means. Famously, Rashi says that it means send the guy you usually send to Aaron. Interestingly, anybody know other interpretations? I think it's the Ramban who suggests it means send anybody else in the entire world other than me. Meaning Rashi says he's referring specifically to Aaron. Ramban says it's just like anybody. I am the last guy on the list. Anybody's got to be better than me. But again, Rashi does famously say that it's Aaron, which raises an interesting question that we'll get to in a minute. And finally, at this point, again, all along, Moshe has been saying no to somebody else. And finally, God, finally, like God has had it, and he gets angry, right? And he says, Vayomer, hello, Aaron achicha halevi yatati ki daber who I know he can talk. And he's even going to come out to greet you. Now, the reason I underline that is, what do you guys think? I really think, and this is the first time that we're really meeting Aaron as a character. And I think in many ways, it really like captures the essence of who he is. Why? Anybody like know why I feel like so that genuine. Is Aaron? What's sorry?
He's so genuine.
Yes, meaning how many, again, we can all think about our own, you know, sibling dynamics and whatever, but you have to realize he is the older brother who's being told to not just be like overshadowed by his younger brother, but to literally serve as his sidekick. In fact, later God is even going to use the language, wait, is it on here, where he says like to Moshe, anybody know what I'm talking about? Where he says to Moshe, you will be to Aaron as an Elohim, and he will sort of be your mouthpiece, right? Meaning it's very clear, right, that Moshe is going to be like the head honcho guy, and his older brother is going to be sort of his, like, not just even second in command, but really just like who doing whatever he tells him to. And yet, not only is God telling us Aaron is going to agree to the job, but what is God even attesting to? He will be genuinely happy. And again, nobody or nothing else in the world could ever testify to what's genuinely in somebody's deepest heart. Like maybe he'll just look happy, but really inside he's jealous or upset. Or God himself says, this samach b'libo, not just outside, truly in the innermost depths of his heart, he is truly going to be happy for you. And again, I really think that this is one of Aaron's greatest traits, and largely is why, of course, what's the famous, you know, chazal that we always say about Aaron? Shalom. And I think this is part of it, right? He has no ego, right? He just is like happy for other people, even like when it seems to be at his own expense. Oh, here it is. I knew I had put it on here. It's coming next in the next underline. Take a look where God then says, right, you'll tell in Pasuk Tet Vav, right? He says, you'll tell Aaron what to say, and you'll put the words in his mouth, and I'll basically be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I'll tell you everything that you should do and say. And look at Pasuk Tet Zayin. V'diber hu lachal ha'am. Again, he'll be the mouthpiece. Look at what it says in that underline in Tet Zayin. V'haya hu yelach lepeh. He will be your mouthpiece. V'ata tiyeh lo lelokim. Right? Or probably here it should be lelohim, right? Because obviously Moshe is not going to be his God, but literally God is saying to Moshe, you are going to lord it over your older brother, literally, right? That's what he's saying. And Aaron is going to be truly happy. And in the next pasuk it says, "Vayomer Hashem el Aaron." God then says to Aaron, who's back in Egypt, "Leif likrat Moshe hamidbar." Right, go out and greet your brother Moshe. And in fact, Vayelach, he listens, he goes. Vayitgesheu b'har Elokim vayishaklo. Right, they have this joyous reunion. Now, a few just interesting points that this raises. First of all, fascinatingly, right, God just spoke to Moshe at the burning bush, and this was this big dramatic event. Fascinatingly, who else does God speak to here? Aaron, right? He Vayomer Hashem el Aaron and Pasuk Chav Zayin, go greet your brother Moshe in the desert. And yet what? Like it's like not even a blink of an eye. Like nobody's even like we have no mention, right? Like Moshe's like, oh my gosh, and what's this amazing sight and what's going on here, whatever it is. Like God comes to Aaron and says, go greet Moshe, and he's just like, all right, sure, like maybe, right? Meaning actually there's two possibilities of how to interpret what's going on here. Right? What are the two possibilities of the fact that God speaks to Aaron, but we don't really hear of any shock or anything like that? Yeah.
It's happened before.
Excellent. One possibility is this has happened before. Now, what would support saying that this actually has happened before? It's not the first time that God has spoken to Aaron. Exactly. Is that opening line of the Shlach Nabiat Tishlach, which again, Rashi, again, not everybody reads it that way, but Rashi interpreted as send the guy you usually send. Now, why does that like fit together? First of all, because in the very next pasuk he says, okay, I'll send Aaron as your sidekick. So it makes sense that if his response is, okay, we'll send Aaron also, that maybe that's what Moshe was referring to. But I think that part of what leads to that interpretation of send Aaron instead of me is the fact that God speaks to Aaron and like he doesn't even seem to blink an eye, which again is just this fascinating possibility of have God and Aaron been in regular dialogue like throughout all these years, of slavery in the desert, and it's only Moshe who suddenly gets this mission, but like God and Aaron have been like buddies the whole time. I don't know, right? But it's possible. And again, what supports this is Shlach Nabiat Tishlach, and that God talks to him and doesn't seem shocked. However, of course, what is the other possibility of why we don't hear of any Aaron falling off his chair or anything like that? What's the other? So one is he's just used to it. He didn't fall off his chair. What's the other possibility? He did, but what? We're just not told about it because he's not the star of the show here, right? Moshe's the star of the show, so his shock, we get told about. Maybe Aaron was just as shocked as Moshe, but again, he's not our main focus, so the Torah just doesn't tell us about how shocked he was that God is suddenly talking to him. But again, it's just interesting to raise these questions of we only hear about Aaron as the sidekick of Moshe, so we don't know his background. Has he been the leader till now? Has he been in regular dialogue with God? Maybe. Again, it's interesting to think about. The other thing that's interesting to think about, which I actually raised in a different context way back then when we were first getting to know each other, that night that we stayed up, not all night, maybe you guys stayed up all night, I didn't, of Sukkot, do you guys remember? Hoshana Rabbah, did you guys stay up all night that night? Yeah, I don't know, whatever, no. But it was still 2 or 3. Right, I was gonna say, but definitely you guys came to Rabbanit Rivki's Sukkah at 2 in the morning, and I met you guys there and whatever. Yeah, right, that's so funny, we hardly knew each other then, right? Yes, you remember? Anyway, so exactly, I'm happy you remember, Shkaya. So if you remember, I spoke about Moshe then, and then in the context of Moshe, one of the things that I raised was this question of what has been Moshe and Aaron's relationship till this point? Meaning, again, could go 2 ways. What are the 2 possibilities? Meaning, again, they come and they have this joyous reunion. They're hugging, they're kissing, right? But what are the 2 possibilities, which is really interesting, and we don't know which is correct, and that's why different midrashim take different approaches. What are the 2 possibilities as to their relationship?
Never met.
Yeah, one of us was they have never met before. Isn't that fascinating? It is possible that we picture this joyous brotherly reunion. It is possible that they have never Is that possible? Because, right, Moshe grew up in the palace. It could be that it's his like long lost brother that they're having this joyous reunion, but they've never met. The other possibility is how actually could we argue that they've met?
Because they're so happy and kissing.
So again, so his mother nursed him, but again, Aaron is only 3 years older. So like, you're right. They definitely met in the sense, because a very good point, right? We know that Yocheved actually nursed Moshe, but again, they may have never seen each other since, age, 2 and, 5 or something like that. Meaning like, it's not like they necessarily grew up in the same household. In fact, we know they did not grow up in the same household. We don't even know, have they ever seen each other past Moshe being weaned? Now, the other so one possibility is no, this is really practically the first time they're meeting, certainly the first time they're meeting as adults. Alternatively, it could be, again, just fascinating to think about these possibilities. How could one argue that they actually know each other quite well? Would be if we would argue what? What's the other possibility?
Prince of Egypt version.
What's our the Prince of Egypt
No,
version?
not-
They definitely don't
not-
know each other. Good. Doesn't mean Prince of Egypt, they don't know each
Moshe
other.
knows that he knows somehow that he's Jewish.
So
Um,
that's the
So
question.
that would, like,
Meaning
make
it's
him have power.
possible. Does Bat Paro know that he's Jewish when she saves him? 100% yes. The Torah explicitly tells us that she opens up the basket and sees a baby, and she says, "Miel Deha Yivrimzeh." And of course, how would she know that he's Jewish? Number one, why is he being hidden away? And like, it's like if a Nazi would find, a German would find a Jew hidden in a closet. Like, who would be hidden there other than a Jewish baby? And some say also maybe because he had a Brit Milah or whatever it is. But she definitely knows. Meaning she explicitly in the pasuk says, "Miel Deha Yivrimzeh." So it's possible. Again, just interesting to think about. Has she told him all along? It's like in any case of adoption, right? Different adoptive parents take different approaches. Some raise the child completely like their own and never even tell the child that they're adopted. And some tell them from the youngest of ages, "We just want you to know we love you so much, we chose you, whatever it is, but like you did have other birth parents." You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know. We know she knows. What we don't know is, has she revealed that information to Moshe? Does he grow up knowing that he's a Jew or not? And together with that, after Yocheved gives him back, after she weans him, have there been regular family visits between, him and his birth family? We don't know. It's possible, yes. It's possible, no. But again, just raises these interesting things to think about in terms of Moshe and Aaron's, dynamic and their relationship till now. Okay, but that's sort of, scene one, so to speak, right? Where we first meet Aaron and get a little bit of a sense of who he is. Now we move to scene 2, which is the one that I really want to focus on because this is the one from our parsha. And it's the one which really just begs explanation, right? Which is the psukim about Chet HaEgel, again, as I said, from this week's parsha. So just to take a look and see, again, in the psukim that I brought here on the sheet, it says, right, Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe l'redet min ha'har, right, the people see Moshe's delayed in coming down. Vayikahel ha'am al Aaron, they gather, to Aaron. Vayomer elav, kum aseh lanu Elohim asher yelchu lefanenu. Get up and make for us. I will translate it as a god right now, even though, of course, anybody know Ramban translates Elohim here as a leader. Very nice, as a leader. But, right, get up and make for us an Elohim that will go before us. Right, we don't know what happened to Moshe. And here is honestly just a very damning pasuk, right? Pasuk bet. What would we expect Aaron to say? No, you wait. That's the wrong thing to do. Vayomer alehem Aaron, pirku nizmei hazahav asher ba'aznei neshechem b'nechem uvnotechem v'aviu elai. Oh my gosh, right? We're so used to it that sometimes we almost even forget that we should be falling off our chairs right now. Like, what is he doing? He says, take all, the jewelry, bring it to me. And Pasuk Gimel, right, they do it. They take off the jewelry, they give it to Aaron. Pasuk Dalet, it's unbelievable. Vayikach mi'adam, he takes from their hands. And again, maybe we're still thinking, maybe he's just going to throw it all in the garbage and say, this isn't what you should be doing. But no, he takes from their hands. Vayatzar oto b'cheret, vaya'asehu egel masecha. Do you understand? Aaron himself, it's not just that he was the leader who didn't stop it. He said, bring the jewelry. He formed it into the egel. He, with his own hands, made the egel. Vayomu, and the people then say, Eila Elohecha Yisrael asher ha'alucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. These are your gods who took you out of Egypt. Again, they are the very people who went out of Egypt. It's not like if you or I would say, this is your God who, our forefather took our forefathers. They are the ones who just left Egypt, a month ago, 2 months ago. And they're saying, this is the God who took you out of Egypt. This thing that Aaron just formed with their own jewelry. And it continues and it says, again, in more damning psukim, pasuk hey, Vayar Aaron, right? He sees what's going on, and instead of again yelling and saying, "No, this isn't what I meant," whatever, he built an altar. Vayikra Aaron, Vayomer Chag LaHashem Machar, and he says, right, there's the holiday, right, for God tomorrow, and they get up early in the morning, they bring sacrifices, and they're sitting, they're drinking, they're eating, right, and they're making merry, they're having like this whole party, right? Unbelievable, meaning it really, and let's even raise the questions. What begs to be answered here? There's at least two separate questions, if not more. Meaning the first one is the obvious one we're saying, which is just how on earth could Aaron do this? I mean, it just boggles the mind. But what else? Like think of it almost then from the opposite perspective. On the one hand, this again, it looks so damning. Look at his language. Look what he does. He forms the egel. They're saying, "This is your God who brought you out of Egypt." He's building an altar. But on the other hand, right, when Moshe comes down and he sees the egel and he smashes the luchot, etc., and he punishes the people, but what? Aaron seems to walk away unscathed. Not only, right, and like a lot of the people, right, some of them have to drink the water, and some there's a plague, and Mila Hashem Elai, and some the Levine kill. Like Aaron should have been their first target. Do you know what I'm saying? Like when Moshe says Mila Hashem Elai and the Levine come, and it even says each, you know, they're killing each one their brother, you know, with the sword. Like no, nobody kills Aaron, and yet he's the one who said, "Bring me your jewelry," and he forms it, and God doesn't kill him, right? Then there's who drink like sota waters, they drink, and God punishes those people, and like Aaron doesn't die. And wait, it goes further. Not only does Aaron seem to walk away unscathed, not only does he not get any of the punishments of any of the people who actually worship the Egel, right? Either drinking from the sota waters and dying, or, you know, Mila Hashem Elai by the Levine getting it. He doesn't get any of that, but not only that, but what happens to Aaron next? What's his next role? He's the Kohen Gadol, right? Do you understand how like inconceivable this is? Like bad enough he doesn't get punished, and like hard enough to understand. But not only does he not get punished, it's not like he just like fades away into the woodwork after that. He becomes the Kohen Gadol in like the Holy of Holies. Like it literally, again, it just boggles the mind. Like how on earth are we supposed to understand this? So famously, Rashi takes one approach, right? What's the approach that Rashi takes? I'm sure you've all learned this like in elementary school, high school, whatever. Like what does Rashi consistently do over and over? Yeah.
He like makes Aaron seem better in the story. Like I think it's that he was like, "Oh, get the jewelry," because he was trying to stop the time. But then when he threw it in the fire, it magically turned into the Ega Hazaha.
Excellent.
Like, tomorrow.
Excellent, right? Rashi consistently, basically, like sort of like whitewashes Aaron's behavior here and tries to show how not only was Aaron not like the instigator of the Egel, which is what it sounds like, but he actually was trying to stop the people. And the way that Rashi even portrays it, he was even trying to like stop them in the best possible way in this sense, meaning it's not necessarily what he should have done, but like he wasn't just being weak, so to speak. What midrash does Rashi bring to sort of justify Aaron's behavior? Yeah.
Also, don't they like kind of blame it on Erev being?
Yeah. So that was just very nice for you. I know how price is here, right? You just mentioned that, right? Did Erev get blamed for everything? Excellent. So yes, also they of course get blamed for being part of it. Also, but again, in the pshat, it really is Aaron. But
they said, like their piece of like gold like turned it into the cast.
Yes, that they say that they brought. Also, there's a midrash that says that that he threw in the petek that says alei shore to bring up Yosef's bones, and that's how. But basically, what Rashi, the famous midrash that I was referring to, that Rashi brings, is that really when Moshe was going up for the 40 days and 40 nights, he says to the people, Aharon somebody else will the Chor, and yet we never hear about Chor. Like, why does it say they went and gathered onto Aaron? Where was Chor? He was also supposed to be the leader. So the midrash, in very characteristic again midrash form, they're not just coming out of nowhere, they're filling in that gap in the text where like Moshe said you've got two leaders, but we never hear from Hor again. And so famously, what does the midrash say happened to Hor? That he tried to do what we would have expected Aaron to do, which was to say absolutely not and put his foot down. And that's what Hor tried to do, but the people killed him. And therefore, what did that make Aaron realize? That if he simply puts his foot down and says absolutely not, the people will just kill him, and that's not going to help anybody, not just like out of self-preservation, but it's just going to get more blood on their hands and an ego on their hands. So like that's not going to work. And therefore, Aaron, after seeing what happened to Hor and wanting to help the people, realizes, let me do it in a more like roundabout type of way. And so every step of the way, for example, Chag LaHashem Machar, first of all, notice he says LaHashem, and he says Machar tomorrow, trying to delay them. And that when he says, take the jewelry of your wives, he thought the wives won't give it so quickly, and then that will delay them. And the fact that it also says in particular, that he himself builds the Mizbeach here in Pasuk Hey, Vayaron Vayiven Mizbeach Lefanav. Sounds like Aaron himself single-handedly built the altar. Again, it just doesn't get worse, except that Rashi says, no, the fact that he built the altar himself was, again, if he had said, all 20 of you come and help me build this altar, it'll be done in 10 minutes. He thought, if I say, I want the honor of doing it myself, he'll go slow and one person will take double. Again, that really every step of the way, that even when it looks so terrible, really every step of the way, Aaron is in fact trying to delay them, and that the reason why he delayed them rather than just being clear was because he saw that Hor just got killed. So first of all, I'm actually even curious, what do you guys think? Compelling, not compelling?
I like it.
Yeah, I think some, like, it's not bad. Meaning, like, first of all, it fits Aaron's personality, and it does fit some of the language. He does say Chag Hashem, and it's Machar, and meaning it's like, and the piece about Hor being missing, I'm just saying, it's not bad. Meaning, it doesn't seem to be the pshat, right? It's not the pshat. I wouldn't have thought it. Just reading the psukim, I wouldn't have thought it, but like, I get where they're coming from, right? But I have to say, it still always bothered me. First of all, it's not 100% compelling, but let's even say that it's true. Let's even say that it's true. That Rashi's take is correct and the Midrashim are correct, and he really was just trying to stop them. Even so, like, I don't know, if I were God, not that I am or anything like that, but like, would you let Aaron walk away unscathed? Would you let him be your Kohen Gadol? Like, okay, maybe then that could justify why he doesn't get killed. Like, I could see that. Do you know what I'm saying? But like, for him not to get punished at all, and not just not punished, but to be the Kohen Gadol, I don't know, that just seems like pushing it too far to me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you want to like understand how it could be? Okay, but like how he doesn't get punished at all and becomes Kohen Gadol, it just to me always seems like there's got to be something more here. Yeah, questions.
Also, Vodazar is a Yaharei Val Yavor.
Excellent.
Like, you have the idea that they were keeping the Torah even though it wasn't actually given yet. Then
Right,
he should have died rather than left.
Excellent, right? So based on Yarval Yavor, he actually, yes, follow in Hor's footsteps. What are you going to do? That's your job. Excellent, right? Yeah, what are you going to do?
He did that in Nadav and Abihu died, like that's his punishment.
Oh, very
Maybe
nice.
Maybe that's why like he was silent, because like he knew that like
Very nice. I'm actually heading exactly there. So hold that thought. Yes. I am going to suggest that. Very nice. But before we even get there, I first want to also suggest something else first about Theta Egel, which I just think is a cool possibility, which is that you guys might be aware, Tom, you maybe even did this year, you'll tell me, is there's two radically different approaches to the Mishkan, right? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like Ramban versus Rashi, and like Sfarno, like say Rashi and Sfarno on one camp and Ramban's on the other. Good. Excellent, right? Excellent, right? Who's in which camp, so to speak? Meaning, who says the Mishkan is b'diavad? No, Ramban loves the Mishkan, right? Rashi and Sfarno, right? Rashi and Sfarno think that the Mishkan is really b'diavad. Now, if it's b'diavad, why do they have it, right? What do Rashi and Sfarno basically say?
It's rehab project.
Exactly. Basically, it was only very good way to put it. It was a rehab project after Chayta Egel, right? Hold on. First, let's actually talk about the Ramban, and then we're going to come back to Rashi and Sfarno. Right? The Ramban loves the Mishkan. What do I mean by like he's not even just like, oh, it's lechatchila. He's like, it is the most lechatchila thing ever. It's the pinnacle of the entire Sefer Shemot. Why? What's the Ramban's? And he really does. I'm not just making it up, right? Why does the Ramban think that the Mishkan is like the best thing ever?
It's a portable Har Sinai.
Exactly. Har Sinai was almost like just like the I don't want to say just the preparation stage, but it was kind of like Har Sinai is not sustainable, right? It's awesome. What it actually reminds me a lot of is like is honestly, it's like sort of Yom Kippur into Sukkot, right? Like Yom Kippur is awesome and awe-inspiring, but you can't live your life like Yom Kippur. You can't not eat and drink your whole life. We can't see God. In fact, even in the middle of Matan Torah itself, we had to ask him to stop. It was just too much. So it's an awesome experience, Har Sinai, but it's not sustainable. You can't live your life like that. We couldn't even handle the whole thing, right? So the way that I kind of feel like with Yom Kippur, and then what does Yom Kippur get translated into? Into Sukkot. What's the awesome thing about Sukkot? In Sukkot, you live in the sukkah, right? You eat there, you sleep there, you hang out there with friends, you play games there, you learn there, whatever it is, but you're in the presence of God, right? In the sukkah, but point being, Sukkot takes the awesome experience of Yom Kippur of where you like feel close to God, and it makes it real, it makes it sustainable, it makes it you're living regular life, but doing it in the presence of God. So I feel like that is what the Ramban basically says about Matan Torah and the Mishkan. Matan Torah is awesome. Nobody's going to say Matan Torah is not awesome, but it's not sustainable. And the Mishkan was what was really awesome. Like the Mishkan is like the best of the best. Why? Why is the Mishkan the best of the best? because that's where you get to live with God and with the sense of the presence of God in your midst in a 24/7 sustainable way that like fundamentally alters your entire 24/7 life. Matan Torah also obviously should alter your life, but it's this one-time experience. Thunder, lightning, it's amazing, but it's a one-time experience. The Mishkan takes that experience and makes it sustainable, makes it real. And for the Ramban, he really discusses how the entire Sefer Shemot, from Yetziat Mitzrayim to getting the Torah is all building up to the Mishkan. The Mishkan is like, we always think that what we're building to is Matan Torah. He says, no, even Matan Torah is a stepping stool, like to get to the Mishkan where we can actually live 24/7 with the sense of God's presence in our midst, right? So that's the Ramban who like loves the Mishkan, thinks it's like, again, best thing ever. However, going back to what I said before, Rashi and Sforno take a very different approach. Rashi and Sforno really think that the Mishkan was b'di'evet, that what should the lechatchila of Am Yisrael's existence have been? We would have gone into Israel, good, but even in Israel, what? Like, meaning, so in theory, so some argue that they agree that would have been a Beit HaMikdash. Some say no, right? Rashi seems to say that. The Sforno actually goes even further, and the Sforno says it explicitly. What does the Sforno really think the lechatchila would have been? Yes, we would have gone straight into Eretz Yisrael, but what would our existence have been in Eretz Yisrael? Not even a Beit HaMikdash. What would the ideal have been? God is everywhere, concentrated 24/7. There's no Kohanim who are closer to God than anybody else. Right? We all should be, right, Kohanim, right? Mamlechet Kohanim, the Goy Kadosh. We all should have been Kohanim. What do we mean by all Kohanim? We all should have had equal access to God. There shouldn't have been a Beit, forget the Mishkan, there shouldn't have been a Beit HaMikdash. There shouldn't have been one place where God is more concentrated. He should have been utterly, like, palpable everywhere, right? It's fascinating, but what, right? Actually sounds very beautiful, right? That everybody's equal access and God is, palpable everywhere. But what then went wrong if they think that was the lechatchila? What messed up?
The Jews.
Chet HaEgel. Why did Chet HaEgel mess it all up? Because what did Chet HaEgel show? That it doesn't work. That when we try to think that we can like direct our own religiosity, it like goes awry. It doesn't work, right? And therefore, what Rashi and the Sforno say is that really the Mishkan, what was the Mishkan's role then? If you have to like summarize it in like one phrase, it was really to be kapara for Chet HaEgel. That the Mishkan was one massive like tshuva exercise. There was really this b'di'evet, but it's what God realized, like, really his ideal was mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, all of us have equal access, God is everywhere, but God sees because of Chet HaEgel it doesn't work. Therefore, he changes the plan, and the entire Mishkan is also to get us kapara, to get us forgiveness. And that's why there's such an emphasis on karbanot, because we need kapara after this massive sin. Now, if we take that approach, it happens to be, I love the Ramban's approach. However, if we take Rashi and Sforno's approach, that really the entire Mishkan would not have existed without Chet HaEgel, and it was a result of Chet HaEgel, and its role is to be kapar for Chet HaEgel, then all of a sudden, what might we say about Aaron, right? Our question that we started with is, how could it be that Aaron goes on to be the Kohen Gadol? What's that?
Makes sense that he's Kohen Gadol.
Good, why?
Because he like needs the most.
Yes, excellent. If we really say that the role of the Mishkan is to be kapar for Chet HaEgel, then all of a sudden, not only is it not like mind-boggling, how on earth could God let Aaron, after his role in Chet HaEgel, be the Kohen Gadol? God had to make Aaron be Kohen Gadol. Why does it have to be? It couldn't be anybody else. Why does it have to be Aaron?
He's the ultimate.
Exactly. It's really, you can even see it from multiple perspectives. One, as Libby said, is that if he like led the movement towards Chet HaEgel, so to speak, then if he himself, he needs the most kapara, meaning this fits what we've been saying the whole time. Till now, it's like inconceivable. I don't understand. Aaron is the one who said, bring the jewelry. He formed the Egel. How could he not get punished? This would be saying it's not per se a punishment, but in other words, how could he go on to be Kohen Gadol? He becomes Kohen Gadol dafka because of his role in Chet HaEgel. He needs more kapara than anybody else. Nothing that he could possibly do could possibly like get him kapara for what he did in Chet HaEgel, other than being the ringleader, the leader, the initiator, so to speak, behind the avoda in the Mishkan. You understand? Since he was the initiator of Chet HaEgel, nothing else will be big enough other than him and being like the mover and the shaker, so to speak, in the Mishkan. It's like exactly like the Midah Keneged Midah, the balance. It's the role that he needs. It's the only thing that can save him, so to speak. And in addition, we could say, okay, but still, how's that there? It could also be, in theory, that we might even say that for Am Yisrael, he was the perfect representative. Why? Like, let's say, who would have been another option? I don't know, maybe Moshe, right? But Moshe, I really think we could say, would not have been able to beg and plead God for forgiveness for Chet HaEgel from the depths of his soul in the way that Aaron can. You understand? Because Aaron, he needs it also. Like he feels it in his kishkas, you know what I'm saying? Like that need to like beg and plead God. I'm just saying in a way that Moshe wouldn't have. Like God had said to Moshe, like, I'll kill them all and I'll start a new nation from you. Like now Moshe didn't want that, but like Moshe's own skin wasn't in the game. You understand? I mean, it was because he loves Am Yisrael, but like he was gonna survive no matter what. He was gonna be okay no matter what. But Aaron's skin is in the game. Like his life and his soul is hanging in the balance together with Am Yisrael's. Like I actually think it almost has to be him in that role, begging and pleading for forgiveness, because like Moshe couldn't have done it from like his innermost depths in the way that Aaron can. And so both from the perspective of he himself needs it, nothing else could get him kapara in the same way. He was the leader of Chet HaEgel. He's got to be the leader of the Tshuva movement, and also for Am Yisrael's sake, I actually think that he actually probably is best suited to the role, which is again such an interesting perspective. The one thing which I don't like about it, I'll point out, is it almost does seem to view then being Kohen Gadol as like not a punishment, but as something bad. So you know what I'm saying? It's like a consequence. And like I agree, like I'm a little bit troubled by that. But despite that, which I am troubled by, I just feel like it fits so well. What's sorry?
It's like a really tough job. Like you're on all the time.
Totally. You're on all the time. You have to worry about you mess up. You're high
all the holidays you're working.
Right, it's not even just that. It's like it's scary, right? Like they even say you have to be really careful below or whatever.
It's like being a Navi, you know, it kind of sucks, but like the honor.
Yeah, it's an honor, but it's hard. Yeah.
I just
Sorry, I'll take this now.
I don't get how they chose who died after Chet HaEgel, because if like
Meaning like who did the Levine go to?
so many people were right. First of all, so many people participated, not all of them were killed, but also like if Aaron was the main instigator, which is what we're kind of saying, then how was he not killed?
That's what I'm saying. Honestly, again, I don't know. Like, how come none of the Levine went to him? Like, he would have seemed to be the first target. I don't know why not, but it raises that question. I don't know the answer.
He's the
I
only Levi
wonder it.
who did sin.
I know, it's interesting, right? That we definitely say Jacob Levi didn't sin, and it seems to be the case. And yet, not only did he participate, he led it. Like,
right, and also like the Kohanim who are supposed to come from the Levium.
I was about to say that.
Went against Egel Zahav. None of them were actually part of that because they're all.
Yes, I was about to say, isn't it also ironic that it's Dafka the B'nai Levi who take over from the Bechorim and do the avoda in like the Beit HaMikdash / Mishkan, because they didn't do Chet HaEgel, and yet Aaron, who was like the biggest role in Chet HaEgel, becomes like their leader. Like again, I don't fully know what to make of that, but it's thought provoking to just like think about. Yeah, Liana, what do you want to say?
Just be that they love, first of all, like the fact that they like they loved him so much.
Yeah,
like,
maybe
they
just
really
nobody could touch him.
loved
I actually like that it was like maybe they even thought they should, and like they just nobody could get themselves to do it.
Yeah, and like in response to the thing about like being the Kohen Gadol as a punishment, I think it was more of like an opportunity. Like
I like that. Meaning it's not a punishment, it's an opportunity, that
like,
he needed.
Here's your like not way out, but like here's something that like you can actually do that will actually work, and you're gonna make an impact in like XYZ. And like I don't know, Aaron, like I feel like he probably wanted to do tshuva anyway.
Yes. And I'll tell you what I like about this is I actually in my own head, I merge it together with Rashi's approach, meaning I can't imagine that Aaron literally built the Egel thinking I wanted to get the people to do Avodah Zarah. So I have to say, I do actually also, yes, buy into like Rashi's Midrashic approach of saying, and it fits with the words, the Chag LaHashem Machar, and he says Chag LaHashem, and whatever it is. Now, still, that still deserves punishment, and that's when I merge it together with this of, you know, of the Kohen Gadol. It is a reward, but I think it was an opportunity that he needed to do tshuva. And by the way, this ties into the title, right, that I called it like when your greatest strengths are your greatest weaknesses and vice versa, which I just think, and again, we'll come back to it at the end as well, is such a powerful lesson that like I know I personally take from Aaron, and I, you know, suggest that we all sort of think about that, meaning Aaron's greatest strength, I think, is the fact, as we all said, it's what he's famous for, Ohev Shalom v'Rodev Shalom, right? But I think it is that exact character trait that made him fall by the ego, so to speak. Why? I think it's he's a people pleaser. He can't stand up against them. It goes against every fiber of his doing. So when the people say, make us an Egel, he doesn't really want to help them, but he can't be like, absolutely not. It just like literally goes against, as I said, every fiber of his being. Exactly. He is so confrontation averse. Exactly. He hates confrontation. And I think what we see from this is, you know what though? Sometimes confrontation is what's called for. In fact, what I would even suggest, and I think this is a really cool point, is remember how we said in the very beginning, when God tells him Moshe is going to be the leader, and it says about Aaron, why was Aaron truly happy for him? I think some of it might be because Aaron knows that he is not good as the head honcho leader. He's truly happy for Moshe, also because he has no ego and he's happy for him, but also because he does not want the role. He knows that the role of the head leader is not good for him, because to be the head leader means that you do need sometimes to confront the people and tell them when what they're doing is wrong, and that goes against his nature. And so he doesn't want that role. And in fact, the one time that he gets put in that role as Moshe's substitute doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? Meaning, that's what I think is such a powerful lesson about like Moshe and Aaron is, and it's such a powerful lesson I think for all of us, right? Like often there's always like a, you know, push to be, I don't know, whether it's class president or whatever the equivalent would be or whatever it is. But like, that's a good role for some people and it's not a good role for others. And it's even true, for example, in teaching about like, say, administration, right? Like often like people sort of expect that like, if you're like a good teacher for a few years, then you move into administration, but like, they're very different skills. Do you know what I'm saying? And like, it just pays to think. And in all of us, I think it's relevant in whatever stage you're at now, whatever roles there are here in Lindenham, or whatever roles there will be next year in wherever you find yourself, to like really think of like, what are my skill set? What am I good at? And to try to like place ourselves in places that will play to our strengths and not to our weaknesses. The Kohen Gadol role was awesome for Aaron. You know why else? What is the really, if you really think about it, what is the role of the Kohen Gadol? What's the essence of it? What's our, it's to make peace between God and his people, right? Isn't that exactly Aaron? He's the Ohe Shalom, the Rodev Shalom. That is what the role of the Kohen Gadol is, right? Is to get God to make up with us when he's mad at us. It's like the perfect role for him that exactly suits him. Whereas being the leader was not. It's like such a powerful lesson that, again, I just really think it pays for myself and all of us to like think about, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, all of us, I think, I'm sure we have strengths and weaknesses, and ways that even our strengths and our weaknesses are often the flip side of each other. You know what I'm saying? Like his strength of being the Ohev Shalom, the Rodev Shalom, made him a perfect Kohen Gadol, but a bad leader. And like, it's important to try to like place ourselves in ways that will play to our strengths. Oh, wait, sorry, let me just shut that. That's my alarm. Hold on one second. Sorry about that.
We wait till 8:30 minutes. Actually,
Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah. Next point, because then I know it's getting late. Yeah, question.
So, kind of like just based on what you're saying, do you think he's kind of the Kohen Gadol because of his, let's say we call it a sin, that's what the people needed? Like they needed to see somebody imperfect as their leader?
That is what I think. I think the people even needed it. They needed to see excellence. I hadn't even put that in, but yes, I like what Sammy is saying. Whereas also the people needed to see, yes, we can fail and we can fail big time, and it doesn't mean that we just have to like give up.
Right, like you can still have a connection with Hashem even though we're
yes, I actually think that's beautiful. I think that Aaron, like, that's very, very nice. That if part of the role of the Mishkan was for God to show the people, I am willing to forgive you if you're willing to do your part, I actually think that God might have perfectly demonstrated that in the character of Aaron by enabling Aaron to be the Kohen Gadol. Very, very nice. Yeah, I like that. Okay, last piece, I know it's getting late, is as Jesse even intuited, where again, we might not, I'll just very briefly sum up like sort of 4, 5, and 6, but let's at least do 3, right? The next major time that we see Aaron is by what should have been the single greatest day of his career, right? The day of the inauguration of the Mishkan should have finally been his day in the spotlight, right? Usually, as we say, he's the sidekick, Moshe's in the spotlight. He, I think, is okay with that, right? Smak b'libo. But still, the one day that should have been his day to shine is the day of the inauguration of the Mishkan. And yet, what happens? It's like really awful. What ends up happening on that day that should have been the greatest day of his life? 2 of his sons are killed. It's awful. It's really awful. It should have been his greatest day, and it becomes probably the worst day of his life, right? But here's what's unbelievable, right? Jesse already intuited and suggested. Wait, guys, stay with me for 5 more minutes. Shh. Wait, guys, shh. right? Jesse already intuited and suggested what I really believe is true, which is it still seems that Aaron walks away unpunished. Again, he even gets, so to speak, to be the Kohen Gadol. We've understood why it might fit, but it's still, I mean, you can't really see being Kohen Gadol as like a punishment, so it does still seem he doesn't get punished. Jesse already suggested, and I really am convinced of it myself, that the death of Aaron and of Nadav and Avihu on the day that should have been Aaron's greatest triumph, I really think is in some way a punishment for Aaron. Now, at first glance, that seems very horrible. What seems horrible about that?
What did
What did they do wrong? That's not fair. Like, if you want to punish him, punish him. Don't take it out on his kids. But I'll tell you why I think it actually makes so much sense, right? There are many different interpretations of Chet Egel. After this is the week of it. And so, right, I'm sure you're probably, I hope, right, learning some of them in classes. Anybody know the Kuzari's approach to Chet Egel? What does he think? Right? Some say it's Mamash Avodah Zarah. Rashi says it's Mamash Avodah Zarah. The shot of like look like that.
They like want to replace Moshe.
The Ramban says they wanted to replace Moshe and get a different leader, right? The Kuzari suggests something else, right? Basically, Rashi says they're actually replacing God. It's Avodah Zarah. Ramban says they're replacing Moshe and they're looking for a new leader. Kuzari says, what are they replacing? What did they lose? The Luchot, because what were they really looking for according to the Kuzari?
Connection.
But they were expecting Moshe to come down and bring them some physical, tangible representation of God. That what they were struggling with, says the Kuzari, was this new, innovation that God, right, and Torah brought to the world, that God is not physical and there's no physical representation of him. And this was totally like hard for them to wrap their minds around. And they finally, Moshe's going to go up there. He's going to bring something down that can help us grasp what is this God that we're supposed to be serving. But then again, Moshe doesn't come down, and that's what they're looking for a replacement for, right? And therefore, according to the Kuzari, what really is the Egel? It's not Avodah Zarah, and it's not a replacement for Moshe. What really was it? It was a representation of God. It was a representation of God. Now, here's what's unbelievable. The Kuzari points out that, at first glance, this might seem awful to us, and like, that's no less than Avodah Zarah. But, and you know famously, what does the Kuzari say? But it's not really any different than the Kruvim on the Aron HaKodesh. Think about it, unbelievable. The Kruvim are images that are like, I don't know, not so different than the image of a calf, right? It's sort of like some type of character, so to speak, made of gold, and yet the Kruvim are in the Holy of Holies on top of the Aron, and like Chet Egel was like the worst thing in all of Jewish history. And says the Kuzari, how on earth does that make sense? Given that he really thinks that the Egel was really just supposed to be a physical, tangible representation to help them direct the worship of God, which he proves from the fact that Aaron says, Chag LaHashem Machar, they were serving God. They were just serving it using this tangible representation, right? But therefore, how is it different than the Kruvim? Anybody know, what does the Kuzari say? How come the Kruvim are the Holy of Holies and the Egel's the worst sin? What's the difference? One was commanded by God. Yeah, is that what you're saying? You can hear, yeah, excellent. Exactly, the way you go about it, and the fact that God commanded us to make the Kruvim, and God did not command the Egel. And says the Kuzari that seemingly small difference makes all the difference in the world. And in fact, in the construction of the Mishkan, anybody know, we're actually sort of in those sections now, right? We're going to get there the next weekend too, right? What phrase repeats over and over and over and over again? Kasher Tziva'otam Hashem. Excellent, right? That they built the Mishkan exactly as God commanded, right? Why, especially according to the Kuzari, is that emphasized over and over and over again? Because according to the Kuzari, that was the sin that they had to make up for, was that by the Egel, they thought they could come up with their own way of serving God, and the whole point that they needed to learn was no, you need to follow what God tells you is the way to serve him. And when God says make the Kruvim, then making the Kruvim becomes a holy act. And when God does not say make the Egel, then the Egel is the biggest sin ever, even though in point of fact of what they look like, they don't look that different. But one was Kasher Tziva'otam Hashem, and one was not. Now, if we take that approach, again, it only works if you take that approach, but if you take that approach of the Kuzari, that was the sin of Chet Egel, was not Avodah Zarah, it was them thinking that they could come up with their own way of worshiping God. Then what's unbelievable? What do the Psukim say? It's not clear what Nadav and Avihu did wrong, but what do the Psukim say over and over again? That they brought in, and if you know the phrase, in Eish Zarah, Asher Lo Tziva'otam, right? Look at the psukim. I brought that right in episode number 3, right? Vayakrivu lifnei Hashem. If you look at the underline, Vayakrivu lifnei Hashem Eish Zarah Asher Lo Tziva'otam. Okay, meaning if we take the approach of the Kuzari to Chet Egel, then the sin of Nadav and Avihu is frighteningly similar to the sin of Chet Egel. You understand? In both cases, they were directing their worship to God. Nadav and Avihu were thinking of God. But what? What was their sin? They did something that God had not commanded. Even uses the word zara, right? Which is like avodah zara, like Chet Egel, so it's not exactly avodah zara. It's worship. It's directed towards God. But meaning, what then would be the point that I think is so powerful, but also frightening? Is again taking Jesse's idea that I think the death of Nadav and Avihu is a punishment for Aaron, but not in a way of God saying, well, your father sinned, so I'm going to strike you with lightning, because like that would be completely unfair, right? And we even say in the Torah, we don't punish children for the sins of their fathers, right? But why then is there death? It's because since Aaron, again, coming from such a good place, he's the Ohev Shalom for Rodef Shalom, he's so averse to confrontation. However, because he was unable, I think for the best of reasons, but because he was unable to put his foot down and give a strong, loud, and clear message to Am Yisrael, this is wrong. You cannot build an Egel. You can only serve God in the way that God commands. Because again, maybe for the best of reasons, and because he has a heart of gold, but because he could not do that, what then happened? His own children didn't get the message. You understand? His own children didn't learn that because he didn't give the message clearly. And because he couldn't give the message clearly, therefore his own children didn't get the message, and therefore his own children tragically fall into the same trap and end up committing a sin that is frighteningly similar to Chet Egel. And therefore their death is not a punishment for Aaron in the sense, again, that like, well, Aaron did Chet Egel, therefore God zaps his kids with lightning. No, it's that because Aaron was unable to like give that strong, loud, and clear message to Am Yisrael, his own kids didn't get the message. Therefore, his own kids end up doing an almost identical sin. So when we say that Nadav and Avihu die, they're not dying and getting struck by lightning from God because of the sin of their father, but it's that they are being killed for their own sin. You understand? It was their own sin. But they do that sin because their father didn't give a strong enough message, which again is like so tragic and so upsetting. But again, goes back to that message of like greatest strengths and greatest weaknesses, and like knowing what our strengths and weaknesses are and trying to place ourselves in places that again will play to our strengths and not to our weaknesses. Just to like sum up in the last ones, because I know we're like it's late, but so I won't really go into them. But what I just think in many ways is very cool is that in many ways this character trait of Aharon like really plays out in many ways through all the other episodes. Like famously, for example, in the Lashon Hara's right Lashon Hara story in the next one, notice it says Vatidaber Miriam ve'Aharon ve'Moshe, meaning who's doing the talking? Miriam, Vatidaber, it's not Vayidabru, it's she said, but then it says Miriam Ba'aron, meaning how do I picture the scene happen probably? She is doing all the talking, but he's kind of like listening, and really what should he have done? He should have put his foot down and said like, no, Miriam, we don't speak Lashon Hara about our brother, but he's the Ohev Shalom Rodef Shalom who's averse to confrontation, so he kind of is just like sheepishly listening, and so he's kind of like held responsible, but not completely, right? So you have this Vatidaber, but it's Miriam and Aaron. Yeah, like I totally see it. I really think it's like the same thing playing out. And by the way, what would support that? He doesn't get punished. Notice it's like it's exactly the model. That's what I'm saying. It's except I think that the death of Nadav and Avihu is, and like that's not a small punishment. The death of his sons. What? Sorry.
The death of his. Like of Nadav and Avihu, was a consequence.
Yes, excellent. Really, I think the better word, and that's actually their way saying all the parenting books is the best way, and like whatever it is, right? Is to not like punish, but to give a consequence that is the direct result of like what the kid does. So here exactly, it's not like a punishment. It's not that God strikes him with lightning. It was a very natural, direct outgrowth of his own actions. But interestingly, so again, the Lashon Hara episode plays out exactly following the Chet Egel like pattern. But what's fascinating is that the Mei Meriva one breaks the pattern in the exact opposite. Why does Mei Meriva break is the exact opposite? Because by Mei Meriva, he seems to do nothing wrong. Nothing, right? What did poor Aaron do? Moshe is the one who hits the rock or gets angry or whatever it is. And yet, all of a sudden, what happens by Mei Meriva? Aaron gets slammed with this massive punishment that he's not going to get to go into Eretz Yisrael. Interestingly, some actually say the Rabbanit suggests that actually the reason why Aaron is punished and doesn't go into Eretz Yisrael is because of Chet Egel. Meaning the difficulty with that, of course, is that the Torah tells us why they don't get to go in and they say it's me Mariva, right? So like it's a little bit difficult to say it's Chaytego, and that's not what the Torah says. But again, but it just raises, but I understand why the Rabbanit says that, because he gets this massive punishment by Mariva, but didn't he do anything wrong? He massively did something wrong by Chaytego, doesn't get punished. I understand trying to say, oh, it must be whatever. In any case, just to like sum it up, by Aaron's death though, it's very beautiful. I'll just really skip to the end because I know we don't have much time, but look at the underline before the Bamidbar Lamed Gimel where it says Vayivku et Aaron shloshim yom kol be Yisrael, right? All of Am Yisrael cried for Aaron and mourned for Aaron for 30 days. And what I think is so beautiful about that, and by the way, it even talks about Aaron twice. God gathered him up, and in Chavav he gets the joy of getting to see his remaining two sons take over his roles. And I guess what I would say, and this was how I started, is I understand if there are those who view Aaron as like a weak character or like frustrating or annoying or whatever it is. But again, I love Aaron, right? I just think he's like, I don't know, like, wouldn't you want to like, I don't know, meet him or like have him as like, I don't know, like your teacher, your father, your brother, you know, like just somebody in your life who just was like this always loving person who just never gets angry at you no matter what you do wrong. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, doesn't he just feel like this like fountain of like overflowing love and forgiveness and like warmth and happiness and just like wanting everybody to feel good about themselves? Anyway, point being, so like I think wait, just let me finish up for the last 2 minutes. Point being, I think Aaron is like a wonderful character. He's really one of my favorite characters. And at the same time, I think it is a very powerful lesson, right? A very powerful lesson that even the best of intentions and even like, again, even his failing, so to speak, at Chet Egel, I think comes from this wonderful place of like being the Ohev Shalom, the Rotev Shalom, who doesn't want to confront Am Yisrael. But in many ways, that character trait plays out wonderfully and beautifully. And he's so happy for his younger brother, Moshe. And like everybody loves him and they mourn for him for 30 days. But it also can play out in not great ways when the situation calls for him to, yes, you know, confront the people. And again, I just think it's a powerful message to all of us, myself included, to think about what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, how sometimes our strengths and our weaknesses are literally the one and the same thing. His Ohev Shalom, Rotev Shalom was his best character trait and was the source of his downfall. And again, to sort of think about for ourselves what our, you know what I'm saying, what our strengths and weaknesses are, and how in some ways there's sometimes two sides of the same coin. And again, how to hopefully place ourselves in situations where our strengths will play out as strengths and not as weaknesses. Okay, thank you guys. Really, I'm so impressed. Guys, I don't know. Does Mishmar always have like half the school here? I'm like, also, I think it's probably a lot there.
Thank you so much.
Really, it's not as cool. Really, like you guys are awesome. I really
Thank you so much, Rabbanit.